Well, Feast Week is over. The tryptophan is wearing off, and college basketball will have a brand new top five after a chaotic week of games. Who do you all think should be number one?
You are Locked On College Basketball, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What is up? Welcome to the Locked On College Basketball Podcast, a 5 times per week national college hoop show, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We are your co-hosts, Andy Patton and Isaac Shade. Isaac, Feast Week is over. What an incredible slate of games, of competition, of surprises, upsets, all of the things that we love about college basketball. We saw them over this weekend as we hoped that we would. We got multiple overtimes against tremendous upsets. The biggest thing that I want to talk about here at the beginning of the show is just what the top five, or really even what the top one, is going to look like. It's been a long time since we've really seen so much turnover early in the season. And of course, could be lengthy conversations to be had about why that is, changes to the game of college basketball in general. But at the end of the day, it's not going to be Gonzaga. It's not going to be North Carolina. Those are the two teams that were 1 and 2 to begin the season. Neither of them are in the number one conversation right now. It's looking like it's going to be between a couple of schools located in the great state of Texas. I would love to hear your thoughts on the number one overall seed and a wild week of games over Feast Week.
Yeah, Andy, you're spot on, man. I am full on turkey and I am full on basketball. Yes. Like, the season is really going now. We've had Feast Week, the MTEs. It's just so great. As we record, the Phil Knight Invitational Championship is going. UConn is up 26-15 on Iowa State, 5.5 left in the first half. As you said, neither of the top two teams to start the season are going to be, probably neither of them in the top five again this week. Both have 2 losses now. It ain't North Carolina. It ain't Gonzaga. But here's the thing. No team has established itself as the team. And that's precisely why we're even having this conversation about who is it. I think we all think it will either be Houston or Texas as number one team in the land. But I mean, Houston looked vulnerable-ish at times last week. But
didn't even score 50 points against, I think they barely scored 50 points against Kent State.
That's right. I think it was 49-44 was the final.
Their defense is incredible. But offensively, there's some question marks there.
Where are we at? Yeah. And so, like, man, all of these teams are capable, though, like Texas, Arizona, Kansas, Kentucky, but none of them are the definitive number one team in the land. We just don't have that right now. Like, as you look at this week's top 10, multiple of those teams have taken multiple losses,
absolutely,
including the current number one team in the land, North Carolina, who we'll talk about more in just a little bit. So as for who is number one, I think you're right. It's got to be one of these two teams in the state of Texas, either the big orange and Austin hook for my wife, who is a Longhorn, by the way, or the Houston Cougars, right? Yeah. Like, let's get some Phi Slamma Jamma action back and going. For me, I'm going to go with Texas. I know, like, if you look at their Ken Palm numbers right now, it's like strength of schedule. You and I were talking about this earlier. It's just not quite there as it is for some other teams. Like Gonzaga has the third best non-conference strength of schedule right now.
Yeah.
But, man, the way Texas looked in dismantling Gonzaga, I was highly impressed. But that's kind of the only time we've seen them in that high capacity a game. But for me, it is the Longhorns and everything they have going right now.
I would love to see Houston and Texas play. Like, I think that would be an incredibly fun
match. We will soon when they're in the same. No, wait. They won't be in the same. They're both leaving.
Hopefully they'll find a way to play each other in the non-conference because I think that would be just an incredible matchup for these two teams. But yeah, Texas right now, the strength of schedule, obviously they played Gonzaga. It was a home game and they waxed them. They deserve plenty of credit for the victory that they had against the Zags. But other than that, we just haven't seen them get challenged all that aggressively. Now, Houston, they haven't had a particularly exceptional non-conference schedule as well. They did play Oregon, an Oregon team that has kind of had some strange ups and downs so far this season, but ultimately does not look like a team that deserved their top 20 ranking or top 25 ranking to begin the season. So I don't know that that's as huge of a victory for Houston. It is also worth noting, though, that was a true road game for the Cougars, so they get a bump there. But yeah, after that, Houston and Texas are definitely the top two teams in my mind, and it's a bit of a virtue of just like being the teams that haven't fallen yet. They have not lost a game yet. There are other very good undefeated teams as well. Virginia is a team that I think absolutely needs to be in the top 5 conversation. They're top 5 per KenPom. They're undefeated. They have an elite offense and defense. One of very few teams that have their offense and defense per KenPom are both in the top 15. Not a lot of teams. Also, I think it would surprise people to find out that Virginia's offense is 10 spots higher than their defense.
That crazy
is unusual for a Tony Bennett led team, but they have looked fantastic. That's right. And then Purdue, and I know we're going to talk about Purdue a little bit later, but I mean, goodness, it's hard to ignore what the Boilermakers have done by winning themselves the PKL, the legacy, by defeating Duke and, of course, defeating Gonzaga. There's a lot of good teams, Baylor, Tennessee in that conversation as well, Arizona. I mean, there's 10 teams that I think could compete for the top 5 spots, but it almost feels like there's a lot of teams in that group, but there's not a lot of teams that stand out as like the best team in college basketball. I think that's probably a good thing when you're looking at the state of the game in late November, early December. You don't necessarily want there to be juggernauts, and this year there's not.
I agree with you, and I think that's so much part of what's going to make this season incredible, Andy, is the fact that it, like, now in November, I mean, there might be a team that establishes itself more predominant, and maybe that's going to be Houston because, quite frankly, the AAC is not going to be what Texas will have to face in the Big 12 once we get into conference play. Right. So, but I mean, Houston does have big games coming. I was just looking back at their schedule. They play Alabama on December 10th. They've got Virginia on December 17th. So some big games there. And even for Texas too, their next 2 games are Creighton and Illinois. Although Creighton's at home again for Texas. So that's interesting there. But yeah, I think this is great for college basketball, like to have a bunch of really good teams. Would love to see a couple establish themselves as elite. Andy, I'm going to put you on the spot.
Do it.
Give me as of right now, this is not like March. This is today, Monday, November 28th. Who is your top 5 in college basketball?
Oh man, that's a good one. Well, Houston and Texas. We're just gonna get that out of the way right now.
One in that order: Houston, then Texas. 1, 2.
Houston number 1, Texas number 2. I think Houston gets a bump just by virtue of starting the season a little bit higher in the rankings. I think they have both teams have a really balanced, really athletic group. Just on the roster, obviously, Jarris Walker, Marcus Sasser are animals for Houston. I mean, really, really talented team. Jamal Shedd, great point guard there. Texas, obviously, with the addition of freshman Dylan Mitchell, with the guard play that they've gotten so far this year. I mean, they've just been absolutely phenomenal. So I'm going Houston and Texas. I want to see them both play some better competition, but that's coming for both teams in a short order. For me, I'm going Virginia third. Again, they're undefeated, and I think early in the year, if you haven't gotten a loss yet, I think you get a little bit of a bump for that. And Virginia has played some good teams. Like we said, top 15, both offensively and defensively. I'm going with the third team out of the state of Texas with the Baylor Bears at 4th, and a team that's kind of been in the top 5. They've had some challenges so far this year, but ultimately still look like a team, especially once Keontae George kind of kicks it into another gear, which I expect to happen. I think that team's going to be really good. And then I'm finishing out the top 5 with the Volunteers, Rick Barnes' squad over at Tennessee. I think there's a lot of other teams that could be in that conversation. I mean, a bunch of teams that could be in that conversation. But for me, Tennessee has, again, a well-balanced team offensively and defensively. KenPom absolutely loves them. KenPom has them third. They're the best defensive team in the country, poor KenPom. And I think that having watched them a couple of times, you can really see how much they get after it on that end of the floor.
Yeah, they get that battle for Atlantis bump over that victory over Kansas. You love to see that. The only difference I would have, other than, like I said, the Texas-Houston flip, is I've got the Arizona Wildcats jumping all the way up to number 1 for me. Dude, that offense is fun to watch. If you haven't checked out Tommy Lloyd's Club, folks, make sure you tune in on them. But yeah, how crazy that the state of Texas is legitimately probably going to have 3 teams in the top 5 when the rankings refresh Monday. We've got a couple other schools. We won't touch on them much on the cusp of the top 10. Purdue, Creighton, Kentucky, Gonzaga, UConn doing work. They're up 12 on Iowa State right now. And so all of those top 5, man, it's fun to see all this right now early in the season.
Absolutely.
You know what teams you didn't hear me mention right there, Andy Patton? It was the North Carolina Tar Heels or the Duke Blue Devils. Why? Because it was a rough day on Tobacco Road Northwest. The Blue Devils and Tar Heels both go down. What is happening to these squads? We're going to talk about it. But first, this episode is brought to you by Upside. Listen, inflation has us all thinking about ways to cut back, driving less, dining out less, whatever it may be. We can all agree there's nothing fun about having to cut back, but we need to because times are tough. But you know what? If you get into Upside, you don't have to worry about cutting back so much because there is extra money in your pocket. I use Upside personally every time I go to the gas station, and it's legitimately helping me. So I can keep extra cash going for me. To get started on this, join me. You can download the free Upside app and use our promo code LOCKED to get $5 cash back on your first purchase of $10 or more. Next, claim an offer for whatever you're buying on Upside. Check in at the business, pay as usual with credit or debit card, and get paid. Upside users are earning more than $1 million every week. It's probably why they have a great 4.8 star rating on the App Store. So again, download the free Upside app and use promo code LOCKED to get $5 or more cash back on your first purchase of $10 or more. Again, $5 or more cash back on your first purchase of $10 or more using promo code LOCKED. This episode is also brought to you by our friends at LinkedIn. And folks, these days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates available. That's why you got to check out LinkedIn Jobs. It's incredibly easy to create a free job post, so why not give it a try? And then add your purple hashtag hiring frame to your profile to let folks know that you are hiring. Also, simple tools like screening questions help you prioritize who you'd like to interview and ultimately hire. You want to finish the year strong, and the right new hire can help you do just that. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. So post your job for free right now at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Again, that's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Well, Andy, we talked about it, and Duke loses in the championship of the Phil Knight Legacy. North Carolina loses in 4 overtimes in the Phil Knight Invitational third place game to Nate Oats Alabama team. Both of these, we need to talk about both of these games, this championship, Duke and Purdue. We also want to get to the Gonzaga Xavier third place game in the Phil Knight Legacy bracket. Let's start with Duke, because this is one of the most talented teams in the nation. But things aren't necessarily off to the best start in John Shire's first year. I mean, it's not off to a bad start by any stretch of the imagination, but it's not overwhelming. But I think part of that is because we actually need to start with Purdue, who is a team that is playing at a much higher level than I believe either of us expected them to.
Purdue has 2 wins of 19 plus points over top 10 teams in back-to-back in a weekend. They beat Duke by 19 points. They beat Gonzaga, I believe, by 19 points as well. This is a really, really good team. And the Big Ten, there was so much conversation going into the season. Who's going to be the team that steps up? All these teams lost a bunch of talented players. Is Indiana going to be the team just because they didn't really lose any talent? And now we're looking at a Big Ten where Purdue and Michigan State in particular have really stepped up in a significant way. And Indiana has been as advertised. And so, you kind of look at the Big Ten and think, hey, they're making a little bit more noise than we thought. And yes, Duke obviously has some significant issues that need to be worked out for Coach Shire. The lack of depth on their team outside of their top couple of guys is alarming. I posted this on Twitter, and I'll share it here as well. 12 points from players on this team not named Kyle Filipowski, Tyrese Proctor, or Jeremy Roach. 12 points from everybody else on that team. Derek Lively, a star freshman guy who they're expecting to be a big time contributor. 22 minutes in this game. He didn't score. He did not score in 22 minutes. 0 for 3 from the field, 0 of 2 from deep. He did have 5 rebounds, but he fouled out in 22 minutes. Doesn't give you any points. Mike Mitchell gives you just 2 in this game. Dariq Whitehead, I know he has just kind of gotten acclimated to being on this roster and playing at this level. So I think we can kind of give him a little bit of a pass. And he also had 6 points off the bench. So he was one of their better contributors. He's their 4th leading scorer in this game for Duke. But at the end of the day, you look at this team, 21 points in the second half. They just fell apart and kind of let Purdue and really Zach Edey kind of do whatever they wanted in the second half of this game. And it ultimately looks like the Blue Devils, like a lot of teams right now early in the season, they just got a lot of work to do.
Yeah, absolutely. They're just figuring themselves out because both Lively and Whitehead, who you expect to be two of the best players on their team, as you said, are both coming back from injury. You talk about Lively 0 points in this game. He's not had more than 5 points all season in the 7 games he's played. 4, 4, 5, 2, 2, 2, 0. I mean, like, and so I don't know if that's a function of he's just not it yet, or he's still coming back from injury. But I think the bigger thing for Duke is let's Kyle Filipowski is a dude, right? He did not get the attention he deserved coming into the season. And kind of similar, like, hear me not comparing him being as good as Zion, but it's similar thing there where Zion was third fiddle coming in to RJ Barrett and Cam Reddish. Same with Filipowski playing third fiddle to Lively and Whitehead. And he's the man right now for Duke. Who has some concerns with Jeremy Roach, their one main experienced guard, and really one main experienced player, having some sort of lower body injury in this game to his right foot or ankle. You're going to have to monitor that to see. But as you said, the bigger story here is not Duke, it's Purdue and what they are doing. Big Ten in general, I mean, gosh, they've got so many teams that are higher in KenPom than we thought they would be. Pretty crazy stuff there. We're going to keep an eye on it. Indiana is second in the Big Ten Conference at KenPom right now, 11th, but we have 6 KenPom teams in the top 24. 6 Big Ten teams in KenPom 24. So Big Ten maybe coming on. Do they have an elite team? That's the question that we're going to have to answer for the Big Ten. But congrats to Purdue winning the Phil Knight legacy. Big stuff there. And now we got to flip to the other bracket. Talk about this crazy 4 overtime game between North Carolina and Alabama. And Andy, I know you were in the building for this game. What did you see?
Oh, man, I saw a lot of basketball. I saw a whole lot of basketball. I saw some pretty horrific late game management by both teams, both coaches. It was a really interesting, confusing, fun, but also frustrating game of basketball.
Yes.
I am so happy to have watched it without a rooting interest. I think that probably helped keep years of my life still going because it was a very stressful game of basketball. It was very fun to get a chance to see this game, though. Obviously, 2 really talented programs. The things that really stood out to me were, again, the clock management situations. Caleb Love and RJ Davis took 60 shots. 60, yes, 4 overtime. So some of the numbers are always going to look a little bit kind of staggering when you look at that. But 50 combined field goal attempts for these two guys. They went 21 of 60. 21 of 60 from the field, 53 combined points. So you like that. But I mean, look, Caleb Love and RJ Davis are great. One of the best backcourts in the country. I firmly believe that. But in a game where they took 60 shots, Pete Nance had 4 points. If I'm not mistaken, he did not score until overtime.
That's right.
Yeah, he did. And part of the issue, it seemed like, was Nance and Baycott couldn't play together for defensive reasons. And maybe that was an issue with Alabama's having a lot of length, having a lot of ability to stretch the floor and kind of force some of these defenders out of their comfort zone. But if North Carolina is going to be in situations where late game against good teams, they can't play 2 of their best players together, that's a huge problem for this team, and one that I guarantee you is going to crop up later this season.
Yeah, absolutely. It will. It was too much one-on-one. Caleb Love, 34 points. That's great. 36 shots. Like, I mean, that's just so inefficient.
Yeah.
Carolina's end of game management was miserable, quite frankly. And I think Leaky Black was probably the most efficient and strong player for this team. Held Brandon Miller, who we've gushed about, scoreless in the first half. Just doing a great job, as he always does, on defense. Better days are ahead for the Tar Heels, but it is a rough stretch. At Indiana this Wednesday, at Virginia Tech next Sunday. Could be a tough road for Hubert Davis's team.
Absolutely. I think better days are ahead. That's a good way to put it. I think better days are ahead. I think Leaky Black was the most impressive player to me on the floor for North Carolina in terms of the defense that he kind of brought to this team, the energy. But it was a bit of a tough one to watch. Not as tough, however, as what Big East fans, or specifically Villanova fans, I should say, are going through with their team, because my goodness, it has been such a rough start to the season for the Wildcats. We knew, of course, Jay Wright leaving, Kyle Neptune taking over as the head coach. We knew there might be some growing pains, some challenges early on in the season for them. Cam Whitmore and Justin Moore both out for this team right now with injury. So I think that there is a grace period and an opportunity to be like, hey, some of these results that we've seen from Villanova are maybe not the results we're going to see from this team at the end of the year. And I believe that. Having said that, they are 2-5 on the season. They went 0-3 in this Portland tournament in the Phil Knight Invitational. They lost to an Oregon team. They finished 8th. They finished 8th in their bracket. There was 8 teams on their side of the bracket. They finished dead last on their side of the bracket. They lost to an Oregon team that was 2-5, 2-4 going into the game as well, and was only playing 6 scholarship players. That's all they had. They had so many injuries up front. They were barely healthy enough to field a full team of players. Walk-ons played for huge chunks of the game, and Villanova suffered their 3rd consecutive loss. This team has a long road ahead. And yes, Whitmore, yes, Moore are going to be back, and those guys are very good and are going to help a lot. But boy, it has been a rough start for the Wildcats.
Yeah, my bold prediction about Villanova not winning the regular season Big East championships looking pretty good right about now. Because Creighton looks awesome.
Yeah,
I love what Creighton's doing. Yeah. Also, we're gonna have to skate by it, but great job for Gonzaga to come back from losing Purdue, who totally understandable now, but come back, get a big win. They were down to Xavier in this game, but great tenacity. I know we need to talk about Julian Strother's career high 23 points. Yep. And really Zach's, in contrast to what North Carolina and Alabama did down the stretch, great closing game for the Gonzaga Bulldogs.
Well, Tom Izzo and the Spartans are adding years to their fans' lives. Multiple close contests in the last week. We're going to touch on their latest game in our weekly Quick Hitters segment. But first, today's episode of Locked On College Basketball is brought to you by Nissan. This week's thrilling moment in college basketball is brought to you by Nissan. The thrilling designs behind the new lineup from Nissan are intended to empower drivers and vehicles as capable as the driver themselves. When I think of unbelievable abilities on the court for this week's thrilling moment, it's got to be this North Carolina-Alabama 4 overtime game. I don't think I can think of anything more thrilling than watching 2 top 20 teams go into 4 overtimes. The number 1 ranked team to start the season going into 4 overtimes. Bama, of course, ended up winning it 103-102 in a game that is going to be talked about for years to come. This segment has been inspired by the thrilling new designs featured across Nissan's new lineup of vehicles. Pursue what thrills you in the all-new Frontier, Armada, or Pathfinder today. Available now at nissanusa.com. All right, Isaac, quick hitters today, and it feels like there are 100 games that we could talk about from over the weekend. I wanted to start, of course, with that Michigan State game against the Portland Pilots. Shantay Leggins' team deserves some serious love across the country. Their last 3 games were a narrow 8-point loss to North Carolina, which frankly felt like a closer game than an 8-point loss. They were right in it. And Moses Wood stepped on the 3-point or stepped on the out-of-bounds line before hitting what would have been a game-tying 3 in that game for the Pilots. They then went ahead and beat Villanova and now just suffered a 1-point loss to Michigan State. Hat tip to Tom Izzo's squad for pulling out another 1-point victory against the WCC team. Not something we thought they would have 2 of before December this season, but here they are. Shantay Leggins may have himself a legitimate competitor in the WCC.
Yeah, absolutely they do. And Michigan State, as we know, is going to be without Malik Hall for a couple weeks now, and it's been a little bit of I wouldn't say a rough go, but a tight go for the Spartans since that big win over Kentucky. Some close wins, a loss obviously to Alabama. But we're going to have to keep our eyes on the Spartans. All 5 starters in double figures for Tom Izzo's club. You love to see that kind of balanced scoring. And so, going to be interesting there. I want to look at Auburn holding off St. Louis 65-60. This was very much an upset watch game for us that almost happened. The Billikens are really good this year. Wendell Green has 22 for Auburn. Just the theme for the Tigers is their defense holding St. Louis. Listen to these numbers, Andy. 38.5% from the field, 28.6 from the 3-point line. Not much there, but here's something. Auburn, even after losing Jabari Smith and Walker Kessler, they are now 7-0 on the young season.
Next game I want to talk about is Seton Hall and Siena. Another Big East team losing a game that they should not be losing here. The Pirates, Shaheen Holloway's squad, fall to Siena 60-55. We know Seton Hall is going to play defense. We know what Shaheen brings to this team. We know what they had at St. Peter's. We know, his kind of style and his mantra, but is this team ever going to play offense? That's the question that we really need to answer. Obviously, they've been dealing with injuries throughout the year. They shot 32.7% from the field against Siena. 17 for 52. They went 1 of 9 from deep. They also, in a game they lost by 5 to a team they should not be losing they missed 12 free throws. At the end of the day, that's just not going to get done. Better days are ahead for Seton Hall. I believe that. And I think that this wasn't the season we were expecting them to take a huge jump necessarily, but it's clear that Shaheen's got some work to do to figure out how to get this team to score some points.
Oof. Speaking of not scoring points, how about the Florida Gators just not performing against West Virginia in the Phil Knight Legacy bracket, also up in Portland? Colin Castleton, to me, this is the issue. 3 points in this game, 1 for 6 from the floor. A player of his caliber has to be not only present, but dominant in a game like this. Gators are now 4-2, I believe, after 4-3, actually. Excuse me. That is their third loss. And so a little bit of a rough start for the Gators at the beginning of the Todd Golden era. And their wins are not that impressive either. Let me just list those off. Stony Brook, 342, Kennesaw State, 214, that Oregon State team, 221, and Florida State. Congratulations. You beat them like everyone else did. They're 140. So, Florida, I'm not sure what we have in the Gators and in what's going to be a difficult SEC this year. West Virginia, who is not projecting to be a strong Big 12 team this year. That's great for their non-conference resume and what they're doing. But Todd Golden, they're going to have to figure out how to get some points on the board as well after scoring not many, just 22 in the second half of this one.
Yeah, you mentioned Florida State, and guess what? They lost again as well. They're now 1-7 on the year. They lost to a not very good Nebraska team, 75-58. Was the final score, and that one a really rough showing from the Noles. 3 of 21 from deep, shot under 40% from the field, shot just 60% from the free throw line. They just don't have a go-to scorer. They don't have the kind of presence that you need to really get this stuff done. And meanwhile, for Nebraska, Derek Walker, awesome performance from him. 10 of 12 from the field, 20 points, 13 rebounds, 4 assists from Derek Walker. Absolutely dominated the Noles, and they are now 1-7 and a very, very disappointing season for Leonard Hamilton.
Yeah, I mean, in the ACC preseason poll, the Noles are picked fifth in the ACC poll. I mean, because it's not like Louisville, right? Louisville is atrocious, but I think they were picked 12th or 13th in the ACC preseason. So it's expected that they're going to be bad. But oh my word, Leonard Hamilton's club. We've said a couple times about teams on today's show, better days are ahead. I'm not sure that they are for this year's Seminoles. And so, Andy, as we wrap up today, I want to give some love to some teams off the radar a little bit who have seen a huge rise in their KenPom rankings.
Yes.
The top 3 KenPom risers in this year so far are Southern Miss, who have jumped 130 spots at KenPom from 324 to 194. Second is Dunk City. Florida Gulf Coast has gone 97 up. And then third, Charleston, who I think is having a strong beginning of their year, has only lost at North Carolina, has won every other game they've played, up 76 at KenPom. Of course, on the other side, the 3 biggest fallers at KenPom, we just talked about them: Florida State, Louisville, and strangely, Loyola Chicago. Ooh. Not looking so hot off the start. They are down 70 spots from their preseason KenPom ranking. Folks, as we've talked about, it has been a great week, a great feast week, and there is more to come this week because we got the Big Ten ACC Challenge, we got the Big 12 Big East Battle, so plenty for us to be talking about on the shows ahead this week. As we finish off, UConn, Iowa State coming back from halftime. Huskies up 38-28. That is a team to keep your eye on. We'll talk about that Phil Knight Invitational Championship game on Tuesday's show. Thanks so much for making Locked On College Basketball your first listen of the day. For your next listen, check out Locked On Sports Today podcast. The biggest stories of the day, plus instant reactions, big game recaps, and of course, the take of the day. It's available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and anywhere else you get podcasts. For my man, Andy Patton, I'm Isaac Shade, and I want to say, until tomorrow, peace.